Sirens sliced through the still morning air, echoing faintly off the neatly painted fences of Crestwood Estates. The smell of wet soil and scorched grass lingered in the air, and the sun had barely climbed above the horizon when chaos took shape. Sprinklers hissed to life in perfect synchronization, 12 pressurized arcs spraying across the emerald lawn like a water ballet turned rogue. And in the center of it all stood her, drenched, disheveled, and screaming as if the heavens had betrayed her. Her once white blazer clung to her skin, streaked with mud and humiliation. Her heels sank deeper into the soaked earth with every furious step, each one a slow-motion defeat. The golden retriever, usually parading like royalty at her side, yanked at its leash in frantic confusion. Sunglasses, once pristine, lay shattered near the curb. From my porch, I watched it all, coffee steaming in one hand, satisfaction simmering in the other. The sound of sputtering sprinklers was the sweetest melody I'd heard since moving here. Because this symphony of chaos, wasn't an accident. It was the final act of a plan I had engineered to perfection. Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA kingdom, had spent months treating my property like her personal red carpet. She strutted across my lawn daily, dismissing my requests, my warnings, even my dignity, with that same razor-edged smile. To her, boundaries were optional, respect negotiable, and rules flexible as long as she wrote them. But that morning, the universe finally leveled the playing field. As water erupted around her like judgment itself, something inside me settled. Peace, muddy, soaking, delicious peace. Of course, peace never lasts long where control is currency. Crestwood Estates was the kind of neighborhood developers advertise in glossy brochures: manicured lawns, picket fences, the illusion of tranquility. Every hedge trimmed to military precision, every mailbox identical. It wasn't a community. It was a carefully curated illusion of one. I moved here after 20 years in structural engineering, chasing quiet after chaos. I wanted slow mornings, lake reflections, and weekends spent fixing instead of fighting. For a while I found it. I poured myself into the soil, shaping my lawn with the same precision I once reserved for blueprints. Every edge measured, every blade of grass nurtured. It became my sanctuary, a quiet place that didn't need to be perfect, until someone decided it should be. It started small, a footprint pressed into soft soil, the faint imprint of a heel. Then two. Then tire tracks from a child's bike cutting diagonally across the grass. By the end of the week, there was a distinct trail connecting her driveway to the main sidewalk, the path of least resistance, carved by arrogance and convenience. Karen didn't walk, she glided. Every step she took screamed entitlement. Her hair never moved, her perfume lingered like an announcement. And when she crossed my property, she didn't so much as glance down. To her, my home wasn't mine, it was part of her domain. I tried to reason with her once. Calm, polite, rational. But the moment she smiled, that slow, pitying smirk that told me I'd already lost, I knew reason wouldn't work here. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. By the next week, she was cutting across twice a day. Sometimes alone, sometimes leading her golden retriever like a parade marshal. Each visit left muddy streaks, paw prints, and shredded grass. Every morning, she looked directly at my house as if daring me to do something. So I did. A red, private property sign arrived 2 days later, bold, unmistakable, perfectly centered at the edge of my lawn. For exactly 24 hours, it stood like a badge of dignity. Then it vanished. In its place, a small wooden stake, carved with the words, Community Pathway Access, HOA Authorized. The audacity almost made me laugh. She hadn't just stolen my sign, she'd replaced it with a counterfeit, complete with the HOA's logo etched in gold. That's when logic took over. Emotion wouldn't win this fight. Proof would. I installed cameras, real ones. Weather sealed, motion activated, night vision enabled. One near the garage, one beneath the porch light, one hidden behind my flower bed angled toward her daily path. And then I waited. The footage rolled in like clockwork. 7:32 a.m. every morning. High heels clicking across grass. Dog prancing behind. Occasionally she'd stop, glance straight into the lens, and wave, a mocking salute that said, "You can't touch me." The following week, I attended the HOA meeting, phone in hand. The room smelled of cheap coffee and chlorine from the nearby pool. Plastic smiles lined the table, with Karen seated at the center, draped in authority. When I played the footage on the projector, the room fell silent. For 30 seconds, the only sound was the echo of her own heels sinking into my lawn. A few neighbors chuckled under their breath. One muttered, "Classic." But Karen's smile cracked, just slightly, like glass under pressure. She called it community inspection. Said she was ensuring compliance. The president nodded half-heartedly, but everyone could feel it, that faint, electric shift when the lie starts to crumble. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just let the footage speak. Her laughter, her trespassing, her arrogance, all displayed in high definition. That night, I sat on my porch, the hum of the streetlight mixing with the faint buzz of crickets. The cameras pinged motion alerts like a metronome. Every time she stepped into frame, I felt the pattern tightening around her. That's when the plan formed. Not out of anger, but calculation. Sprinkler schematics, water pressure ratios, soil absorption rates, the language of justice in my world. I mapped out her route, set the activation zone to her footsteps, and tuned the timing with precision. Between 6:30 and 8 a.m., her window of arrogance. It wasn't revenge. It was equilibrium. That night, I watered heavy, the soil soft, the traps armed. And as dawn broke, I watched through the lens as inevitability unfolded. At 7:28 sharp, the motion sensors blinked to life. She stepped into frame, crisp, composed, untouchable. 2 seconds later, 12 geysers erupted in unison. Water slammed into her like poetic karma. She spun, shrieked, slipped, dignity dissolving under a downpour of justice. The dog barked frantically, leash tangled, both soaked in the chaos they'd created. I didn't laugh immediately. Just watched. Let it sink in. Let it mean something. Because for the first time in months, she wasn't in control. And that feeling, quiet, cold, complete, was worth every drop. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. People like her don't surrender. They regroup. And when they strike back, they make sure everyone burns. What happens when someone who's built their identity on power suddenly loses it, even for a second? You're about to find out. The night after the meeting, the air in the neighborhood felt electric, tense, watchful, as if the manicured lawns themselves were holding their breath. Porch lights flickered on one by one, but no one lingered outside. The story had spread faster than any HA memo ever could, and with it came a quiet, simmering divide. On one side were the homeowners who'd suffered under Karen's endless stream of petty fines and power plays. On the other, the few who still clung to the illusion of her authority. And right in the middle of it all stood me, the man who had turned her rulebook into a weapon of irony. I didn't feel triumphant that night. Not really. There was something heavier beneath the laughter and whispers, a quiet certainty that this wasn't over. People like Karen didn't crumble, they rebuilt their control in darker corners. And I knew she was already plotting her comeback. The next morning confirmed it. A bright orange notice flapped against my door, taped with the same precision as her manicured nails. Mandatory inspection. The words might as well have been a declaration of war. I read it twice, my pulse steady but rising. The inspection would be led by none other than Karen herself, a final attempt to reclaim her authority in the only language she understood, humiliation disguised as regulation. Saturday came with heavy clouds and the faint hum of cicadas. I stood on the porch as the self-appointed queen arrived, clipboard clutched like a royal decree, 2 loyal board members trailing behind her like bodyguards. She moved with that familiar air of superiority, the kind that turned ordinary suburban space into a stage. Every glance, every note scribbled on her clipboard felt theatrical, designed not to assess but to intimidate. She ran her fingers along the fence, inspected the mailbox with surgical precision, even crouched to check the alignment of paving stones like she was searching for evidence of sin. When she finally stood, she tilted her head, surveying the grass as though it personally offended her. She mumbled something about uneven growth, suggesting the lawn might need to be resodded, as if she hadn't been trampling it for months. Her eyes met mine briefly. No words, just that cold flicker of control. But beneath it I saw something new, not confidence, but fragility. The unspoken realization that for the first time, the neighborhood wasn't laughing with her, it was laughing at her. That night, I sat in front of the camera feed again, the same grainy glow of infrared illuminating the world outside. And that's when I saw it, movement. Karen's silhouette creeping across my lawn long after dark, flashlight beams sliding over the damp grass like a searchlight. She wasn't walking anymore, she was checking, inspecting, trying to find her power in the only place she still had control, my property. It was almost tragic watching her like that. A woman who once dictated everyone's lives reduced to sneaking across backyards in the dark. But sympathy has its limits. So, I made a few adjustments. I tuned the sprinkler system again. This time, not just for motion but for body heat. A simple recalibration, clean and elegant. If she came again, the system would respond instantly. The next night, at 9:07 p.m., the cameras lit up. There she was, dressed in a pale pink tracksuit, flashlight trembling in her hand, moving with the hesitance of someone aware they're being watched but too proud to stop. The moment her shoe pressed into the grass, the system came alive. A hiss, then a roar, jets of water bursting from the ground with surgical precision. She shrieked as the blast hit, stumbling backward, flashlight spinning through the air. For a few seconds, she vanished into chaos, water, mud, and the sound of indignation colliding all at once. When she finally scrambled up, soaked and furious, she shouted into the darkness, her words carried off by the hum of sprinklers. Watching from my porch, I couldn't help but laugh, not out of cruelty, but satisfaction. She had spent months trying to assert dominance through humiliation, and now she was living her own lesson. By morning, the retaliation arrived. A formal letter, final notice, accusing me of aggression and sabotage. Aggression for protecting my own lawn. Sabotage for installing sprinklers. It was absurd but also predictable. Karen's power didn't come from logic, it came from fear. And now that fear was slipping away. So, I changed my strategy. No more back and forth. No more escalation. I let her think she'd won. I ignored her letters, her threats, her glares. On the surface, I became passive, quiet, compliant. But beneath that calm, something else was forming. A design, intricate and deliberate, one that would strip away her illusion of control completely. The sprinklers had been poetic, a statement. But they were temporary. Water dries. Embarrassment fades. This time, I needed permanence, something that couldn't be laughed off or forgotten when the gossip shifted. Something that would show everyone what she really was. I started documenting everything. Every notice, every inspection, every minor act of intimidation. I saved emails, recorded timestamps, logged her late-night trespassing under the glow of her flashlight. Each piece was a puzzle waiting to reveal the full picture, not of a rule enforcer, but of an abuser of power. And when the time came, I would reveal it. Not to her. Not even to the HOA board. But to the one authority she couldn't manipulate, the county itself. As I sat there that night, camera feeds flickering across my laptop, I realized something chilling. People like Karen don't fear exposure. They fear irrelevance. And once the neighborhood stopped listening, once her power no longer mattered, what would she become? Maybe that was the real question. What happens when the self-appointed queen of order realizes her kingdom was never hers to rule? The storm she'd been building for months had finally cracked open. And now, I wasn't just dealing with a power-hungry neighbor. I was facing a woman desperate to prove she still had control over a world slipping through her fingers. If the sprinklers had been my spark, this next move was the ignition. The plan wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure, a structural shift that would peel back the polished surface of her HOA empire and show everyone the rot beneath. I started sketching the outline of that plan in the least glamorous place possible, the back of a grocery receipt, late at night, under the cold glow of the kitchen light. I mapped it like a crime scene, evidence, motive, witnesses. Every action she took would feed my case, every overstep would tighten the rope she'd woven for herself. The goal wasn't confrontation. It was collapse, slow, precise, inevitable. But first, I waited. I let the neighborhood settle. The laughter and gossip from the sprinkler fiasco still echoed through the cul-de-sacs like ghostly whispers. Karen needed to believe I was done, that I'd had my fun and moved on. That's when she'd overreach. People like her always do. They mistake silence for surrender. And right on cue, the retaliation arrived. A bright yellow flyer appeared on every doorstep, printed in bold, self-important font. New HOA policy update, effective immediately. Beneath the jargon and fake legal phrasing, one rule stood out like a flashing siren. All lawns adjacent to common sidewalks are now designated as community access zones for pedestrian safety. Pedestrian safety. On streets where no one walked. It was pure vengeance disguised as policy. A petty rewrite of the rulebook just to turn my private yard into public property. And at the bottom of the page, signed with theatrical flair, Karen L. Whitmore, Head of Property Aesthetics. The same woman who fined a neighbor $100 for leaving his trash invisible for 12 minutes now wanted open access to everyone's lawn. The neighborhood saw it too. The murmurs started that same morning. My neighbor Tom, the retired cop who'd clapped during the HOA meeting, wandered over with his coffee steaming in hand, shaking his head. I didn't need words. The smirk on his face said it all. She wasn't enforcing policy anymore. She was declaring war. And in her arrogance, she just handed me exactly what I needed, written proof. A tangible example of her using official HOA power for personal retaliation. But I didn't strike back right away. Not yet. I let her bask in the illusion of victory. 4 days, she strutted across my lawn like a parade marshal, heels stabbing into the turf as if each step was a message. Sometimes she brought backup, 2 or 3 board members walking alongside her, pretending it was all routine inspection. I stood at my window, silent, smiling, the camera rolling every time. When she noticed me filming, she didn't hide it. She performed. She even turned once, gesturing dramatically toward the grass and announcing for all to hear, community access, perfectly within the rules. Her voice was honey dipped in venom, her confidence brittle and loud. But every performance needs an audience, and hers was shrinking. The neighbors had begun watching too, peering through curtains, whispering between mailboxes. Everyone knew this wasn't about safety. It was about control. And control has a way of crumbling under its own weight. Then came the sign. I came home one afternoon to find a brand new post planted dead center in my yard, a clean white plaque with neat block letters, community shortcut, HOA approved. It was absurd, childish, and yet so perfectly her. I stood there staring for a long moment, the absurdity of it sinking in, before laughter finally broke through the disbelief. It wasn't just retaliation anymore, it was obsession. She needed to win, even if it meant inventing a victory out of nothing. That night I called Tom. We didn't need many words. He laughed, I laughed, and between the amusement, an idea began to take shape, poetic, public, and precise. Karen loved attention. She thrived on it, fed off it. So, I decided to give her exactly what she wanted, a spectacle. The next morning, a landscaping crew pulled into my driveway in bright green trucks, tools gleaming in the sun. Engines humming, shovels clanging, the kind of noise that drew eyes fast. And sure enough, like clockwork, there she was, stepping out onto her porch, arms crossed, curiosity masked as authority. From her robe to her scowl, she looked every bit the suburban monarch interrupted during court. She hovered as the crew worked, scrutinizing every move. I met her glare with a smile, letting her think she was winning again. But beneath the surface, my plan was already unfolding. What she didn't know was that I wasn't laying down grass. I was setting a stage. The turf was synthetic, perfectly green, unnaturally smooth, with a thin layer of lubricated mud sealed beneath it. To the naked eye, it was flawless. To the uninvited foot, it was chaos waiting to happen. By sunset, the lawn gleamed like a golf course. Karen even stopped to inspect it, hiding her admiration behind clipped criticism. I thanked her, politely, graciously, the way you thank someone right before you pull the rug out from under them. And then I set the trap. A discreet motion sensor camera disguised as a garden light. A simple sign beside the fake HOA plaque, private property, do not enter. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Morning arrived with the soft chirp of birds and the low hum of sprinklers. And right on schedule, Karen appeared again. Floral dress, wedge sandals, phone in hand, her voice sharp and indignant. She stepped onto the turf mid-sentence, chin high, proclaiming her authority to whoever was unlucky enough to be on the other end of the call. And then, one misstep, one shift of balance, and gravity took the stage. Her feet flew out from under her in a blur, her body crashing down flat against the turf. A dull thud echoed, followed by the splash of her phone landing in the puddle near the sprinkler line. Mud streaked her pristine dress. Her hair clung to her cheeks. The look on her face, shock, disbelief, humiliation, was almost Shakespearean. I stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in my hand, heart steady, eyes calm. The universe had done the heavy lifting for me. She scrambled up, slipping again, her dog barking in panic, leash tangling in the chaos. By the time she escaped to the sidewalk, she looked like a cautionary tale written in mud. And the neighborhood saw everything. Curtains twitched. Cameras glinted. One neighbor even recorded the entire spectacle from across the street. Within hours, the footage spread like wildfire. Group chats exploded. Captions popped up, HOA Queen meets her match. By nightfall, the internet had taken hold. Someone added dramatic music, another added slow motion. What started as neighborhood gossip became viral entertainment. Karen's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. By the next morning, a new letter appeared on my door. Notice of investigation, endangerment of an HOA official. It was laughable, an act of desperation written in official fonts. She was trying to claw her way back to control, but the damage was already done. And then, the escalation I didn't expect, the local news van. By 8:30 a.m., she was back, this time dressed like she was marching into court, flanked by her loyal board members. Behind them, a news crew setting up tripods, microphones gleaming in the sun. She was staging her redemption arc on live television. But what she didn't realize was that every story she tried to control only dug her deeper. When I opened the door, calm and casual, she launched into her tirade. Aggressive property owner. Danger to the community. Her words spilled out rehearsed, dramatic, but hollow. And when the reporter asked if I had a comment, I did. A simple one. Would you like to see the footage? The silence that followed was worth every second of patience I'd spent. When I played the clip, the fall, the mud, the scramble, the cameraman actually snorted. The reporter tried to stay professional but couldn't stop smiling. And for the first time, Karen's mask cracked. She lunged, shouting, demanding they cut the feed. But it was too late. The camera's red light was already on. Broadcasting. Her second fall came moments later, an encore performance, perfectly timed by fate itself. The turf was slick again, dew shimmering in the morning light. One misstep, one slip, and gravity claimed her once more, this time, in front of the entire neighborhood and the evening news. By nightfall, the footage had gone viral again. Headlines popped up like fireworks. HOA leader slips on her own rules. Karma caught on camera. When the HOA goes too far. The internet didn't hold back. Comments poured in, ruthless, mocking, oddly poetic. And as her carefully curated authority burned down around her, something deeper emerged. Screenshots, emails, old finds, people began digging. Her empire of petty control was unraveling, thread by thread. For the first time, Karen wasn't feared. She was pitted. Exposed. But as the laughter spread, I couldn't shake one thought, one chilling certainty. When people like her lose control, they don't fade quietly. They come back sharper, meaner, and more dangerous than before. And I had the sinking feeling this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of her downfall. Because when the curtain rises again, what kind of person steps out of the wreckage still desperate to rule the ashes? For weeks, the neighborhood had been holding its breath. The chaos, The whispering, the tension that once hummed beneath every email, it all went still. And then it happened. Tom called that evening, his voice half lost between laughter and disbelief. "She's finished," he said. "Half the board's turning on her. Mark's calling an emergency meeting." I didn't even try to hide the satisfaction in my voice. Finally. For once, the storm wasn't coming for me. It was circling her. By nightfall, the internet had done what the HOA never could: hold her accountable. Memes, t-shirts, even parody videos flooded social media. One went viral, a photo of her pointing and shouting, captioned, "Watch your step." And for the first time, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. Not for the laughter, not for the downfall, not for the poetic symmetry of watching a self-made tyrant unravel under the same spotlight she used to blind others. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure. The illusion of control had cracked, and everyone could finally see who'd been behind the curtain all along. The next few days were quiet. No HOA warnings tucked under my door. No angry knocks demanding compliance. Even her car stayed parked in the same spot. The queen had retreated from her throne. Then one afternoon, a flash of color caught my eye. A for sale sign, staked right in her front yard. I stood there, just watching it sway in the wind. The letters glinted under the sunlight like the final frame of a movie I hadn't realized I'd been starring in. That evening, I walked my dog across the same stretch of fake turf she once policed like sacred ground. The sun dipped low, casting a soft glow across the neighborhood she'd ruled with fear. My dog sniffed at the spot where she'd fallen, tail wagging, like even he could smell the ghost of victory. Tom showed up later with 2 beers, that familiar grin on his face. "To the end of an era," he said, clinking his bottle against mine. I raised mine back. "And to the return of common sense." We laughed, but beneath the laughter, something heavier stirred, the realization that justice had cost something. Peace doesn't come free. It's paid for in discomfort, confrontation, and sometimes, in watching someone else's world collapse. A few nights later, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. I hadn't planned to go. I thought I was done with the HOA, done with their fluorescent rooms and fake smiles. But when Tom showed up again, grinning like a man holding dynamite, I knew something big was about to blow. "You should come," he said. "Trust me, you'll want to see this." Inside the clubhouse, the air felt electric. Whispers darted like fireflies between rows of folding chairs. But something was missing: her presence. For once, she wasn't sitting at the head of the table. Mark was. Pale, sweating, and visibly nervous. A man forced to take the wheel of a sinking ship. When I walked in, people actually clapped. Quiet, hesitant, but real. It was the sound of a community rediscovering its voice. Mark cleared his throat. "We can all agree there've been recent events that damaged our reputation." Someone snorted. Another whispered, "You mean Karen's comedy hour?" Laughter rippled like the first cracks of rebellion. Then came the blow. Effective immediately, she's been suspended pending investigation. Tom leaned over. Translation? Fired, just waiting for the paperwork. I almost smiled. Almost. But before the relief could settle, Diane, the treasurer, one of Karen's oldest allies, stood up clutching a folder that looked like it weighed a ton. Her hands trembled. "I've something to disclose." Her voice cracked as she read the numbers. "Irregularities in our budget. Unapproved consulting fees. $42,000, missing." The room froze. You could hear the air leave the building. Someone gasped. Tom whispered, 42 grand? For what? Her shoe fund. But Diane's next words dropped like a grenade. The payments were written to W. Property Solutions. But the company doesn't exist. And just like that, the room erupted. Voices overlapped. Years of suspicion ignited into outrage. She hadn't just bullied them, she'd stolen from them. The fines, the threats, the inflated fees, all part of a personal cash pipeline she'd built right under everyone's nose. Mark pounded the table, trying to contain the chaos. "We'll contact the auditor. This is a criminal matter." A quiet voice from the back rose. Patricia, the woman she'd once humiliated for hanging a wreath too early. she said softly. We all knew she was corrupt. We just didn't know how to stop her. John showed us we could. And suddenly, the room turned toward me. Every face. Every set of eyes. I didn't know what to say. All I'd wanted was peace. A patch of quiet green. But somehow, standing up for it had broken the spell for everyone. That night, as I walked home, I realized something had changed. Kids rode bikes again. Neighbors waved. The glow from the windows felt warmer. The air lighter. The fear had finally lifted. But peace never comes without its echoes. The next morning, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a single note. You think you won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I almost laughed. Classic. Straight to the trash. But later that same afternoon, another envelope arrived, this time from the county clerk. Inside was a check for $120, the exact amount she'd fined me for those so-called violations. And a note. Mr. Miller, please accept this reimbursement for wrongful fines. Thank you for helping us uncover misconduct. So, it was real. The investigation. The charges. The collapse. She wasn't just suspended anymore. She was being questioned. Tom dropped by again that night, six-pack in hand, grin wider than ever. They've got her for embezzlement, he said. Apparently, she created fake invoices, pocketed HOA funds, even used the community credit card for her wine nights. She's done. And for a long while, I just sat there, the news hanging between us. I wanted to feel victorious. I really did. But somewhere beneath the satisfaction was an emptiness I didn't expect. Watching someone's empire fall sounds satisfying until you realize you've also been living under its shadow for too long. A week later, I saw her one last time. Dusk had painted the sky orange and blue, and a moving truck idled in front of her house. She stood on the porch, no clipboard, no authority, just a woman surrounded by cardboard boxes and ghosts. For a moment, our eyes met. No words. No hatred. Just the quiet recognition of an ending neither of us planned but both of us needed. The next morning, the for sale sign had a red sticker across it, sold. And just like that, the chapter closed. In the weeks that followed, the HOA reformed from the inside out. The bylaws were rewritten. The fines abolished. Expenses opened for all to see. No single person could ever hold unchecked power again. They even asked me to help. At first, I refused. I was tired of fighting dragons. But Tom was right. You've already slain one, he said. Might as well make sure it doesn't grow back. So I stayed. Helped rebuild. Helped make sure that what happened here would never happen again. And one evening, as the sun set over that perfect stretch of lawn, quiet, untouched, and finally mine, I realized something. The real victory wasn't the downfall of a tyrant. It was the peace that came after. The kind of silence that means freedom. Because sometimes, the most powerful sound in the world is nothing at all. But peace has a strange way of inviting new storms. And as I'd soon learn, this neighborhood wasn't done testing me yet. Peace in suburbia is a fragile illusion, like sunlight on dew, beautiful until disturbed. It can shatter with something as small as a barking dog, a misplaced fence post, or one neighbor who mistakes authority for purpose. 4 months after her departure, our neighborhood exhaled for the first time in years. The silence felt different now, not heavy, not fearful, but cleansing. Lawns seemed to grow greener, laughter returned to the cul-de-sac, and people started waving again instead of whispering. The air itself carried a new kind of stillness, not the silence of fear, but of peace hard won. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. But karma, as I've learned, doesn't always sign off quietly. It ties its own loose ends, neatly, poetically, and sometimes in ways you don't expect. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. The kind that smells of cut grass and brewed coffee. When I opened my mailbox, a plain white envelope sat inside. No return address, no markings, just wait. Inside, a single note written in tidy script. Thank you for standing up to her. She ruined more lives here than you know. Some of us couldn't speak before. But we can now. Consider this our way of saying thank you. Tucked beneath the letter was a cashier's check for $5,000, signed simply, from the ones she fined into silence. I sat there on my porch, the morning sun creeping across my shoes, the letter trembling between my fingers. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant, that the fear had finally broken. People who once hid behind closed blinds were now free enough to give. When Tom wandered over later that afternoon with a beer in hand, he found me staring at the check like it was a ghost. He smirked, the sunlight catching the side of his grin. I told him what happened. He just nodded and said, "Then use it for something that lasts." That thought stayed with me. So the following week, I did something I never thought I'd do. At the next HOA meeting, my first as an elected member, ironically, I stood before the same room that once echoed with shouting and shame, and I proposed something different. No more fines. No more punishments. No more rules designed to break spirits. Instead, a community garden, right there in the forgotten patch of grass at the end of the cul-de-sac. Every home would have a plot to plant something. Flowers, herbs, vegetables. Whatever they wanted. No restrictions. No fees. Just growth. The room fell quiet for a long, heavy moment. And then, Patricia, the woman who'd once been fined for her Christmas wreath, raised her hand. "I'll donate the seeds," she said. Tom added, "I'll build the boxes." And one by one, every hand in that room went up. It was the first unanimous vote the HOA had ever made. 2 months later, the garden bloomed. Rows of tomatoes and sunflowers stretched toward the light. Mint and lavender perfumed the air. Kids came after school to water the beds. Retirees sat on benches trading stories and recipes. The place that once symbolized control had become a sanctuary for connection. And in a strange, poetic twist, it was her downfall that had planted the first seed of that peace. But life has a sense of humor. A few weeks later, I noticed a new name on the mailbox 2 doors down, the one that used to belong to her. The for sale sign was gone, replaced by a cheerful welcome home. That evening, a moving truck rumbled up the street. Out stepped a woman in her mid-40s, jeans dusty from travel, a t-shirt that read, "HOA, making simple things complicated since forever." I couldn't help but laugh. When I walked over to welcome her, she smiled, the kind of genuine smile that didn't hide anything. "Nice to meet you," she said. "I'm Karen's sister." The words hit like static in the air. For a moment, I braced myself, wondering if this was karma's second act. But then she shook her head and laughed softly. "Don't worry," she said. "I'm not her. Haven't spoken to her in over a year. Not since whatever power trip she went on." I asked where she'd gone. "Arizona," she said. "Bought a house in one of those communities without HOAs." For the first time, I actually laughed out loud. Poetic justice doesn't always need a judge. Apparently, she was gardening now, planting vegetables, growing her own food. Maybe trying to start over. Maybe trying to feel human again. And somehow, that image, the once self-crowned queen of suburban order now kneeling in the dirt, planting tomatoes under her own sky, felt like the truest kind of balance. Her sister settled in easily. No drama, no gossip, no clipboard crusades. Just a good neighbor. And for the first time in years, that corner of the street felt normal. Sometimes late at night, I'd walk past the community garden. The solar lights glowed softly along the path, lights I'd installed with that mysterious $5,000. Children's laughter still echoed faintly, even after dark. Mint and lavender swayed gently in the wind. It was hard to believe it all began with a single patch of grass, and one person's decision to stop letting someone else trample their peace. Word of our story spread far beyond the cul-de-sac. People from other states started emailing me, homeowners, renters, even board members, all saying the same thing. "You gave us courage. You proved karma's real. You made my dad laugh again." Funny how something so small, a patch of turf, a hose, a few drops of water, could spark something so much larger. When we finally held the community's garden night, the place shimmered beneath warm string lights. Neighbors clinked glasses, kids raced between the rows, and laughter replaced the tension that had once filled every inch of this street. Tom raised his drink and said, "To the man who turned revenge into renovation." But I just smiled and shook my head. No, I thought. To the neighborhood, and to learning that the best revenge is peace that lasts. The crowd cheered, and for a moment, everything felt exactly as it should be. Because this story was never about victory or humiliation. It was about reclaiming something stolen, not property, but peace. Power built on control will always collapse under its own weight. But respect, real respect, grows roots. And as I stood there, watching the golden glow dance across my once battleground lawn, I realized something simple yet profound. The grass wasn't greener because I fought for it. It was greener because I let it grow. In life, some battles aren't about winning. They're about boundaries, about deciding what you'll no longer let anyone take from you. Anger is easy. Revenge is tempting. But real strength is quiet, patient, poetic. It's knowing when to stand your ground, and when to build something beautiful instead. Karen's downfall wasn't about humiliation. It was about truth catching up. And when you stop living in reaction to someone else's chaos, you finally start living in peace. So maybe the question isn't whether justice was served. Maybe it's this. If someone kept trampling your peace, would you fight back with fury, or plant something better in its place?